Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Paul Klein for a very special review. It is, of course, our review on Oppenheimer, film which is now out in cinemas worldwide, directed, written, produced by Christopher Nolan, starring Cillian Murphy as the lead role. Of course, the J. Robert Oppenheimer biopic. I could give this the introduction of introductions, but that would take as long as the film's runtime, if I'm being completely honest. Paul, how are we doing tonight?
Hi, Ken. I'm doing fine. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's not that one. It's not that big film about the thing that happened in Japan. It's the other one.
Listen, we've put a note in the schedule. It's been one of the most insane weekends in cinema history. Now that is statistically confirmed as one of the most insane weekends in cinema history, which we get to talk about, which is wonderful for the industry as well as the memes and everything else going on in between. So, yeah, we're going to talk a bit of Barbie. We're going to talk Oppenheimer. We're going to give a review. And normally for the big releases, we do spoiler-free reviews and we do spoiler discussions. Well, this is a biopic based off real events. So, I guess if you haven't seen the film, then we're going to talk about the film. If you think there are spoilers, atomic bombs, you might have heard of them. You might have seen them, in history at school or many other ways. You might have seen them in other films that have been made since then. Even before this film was at the cinema, we kept getting trailers for the creator. Yeah, this is real life. So I've just decided there's no spoiler video. There's no spoiler discussion. We're just going to talk about the film as it is. We have both seen it. We're going to talk about experiences watching the film, our thoughts on the film, the cast, everything about it, and talk maybe a bit of box office at the end / Oscar season early predictions, because it is July and we don't want to get too far ahead of certain things in a very unpredictable end of year with a lot of strikes happening at the moment, which we're all in solidarity with. But yeah, that's a weird, deep intro, but we want to hear from people at home. So please do comment your thoughts on Oppenheimer, comment your thoughts on Nolan, where you stand with this film, whether you did Barbenheimer, if you participated, do comment and let us know. And if you enjoy this video, do hit subscribe. And there's a lot more on the way. There will be more Christopher Nolan videos on the channel, dates TBC, but there are a few videos in the pipeline. When I say TBC, I'm talking like months away potentially as well. So nothing to check on the next couple of days, but do get involved. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so using our linktree.com/cinemasavvy link. That takes you to all of our social media sites where we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Letterboxd until Elon Musk destroys Twitter, and a link to Redbubble in the description. But Paul, it's lovely to get you on a review that isn't a Tom Cruise film or a retrospective on a director, because it's become a running joke with me and you. You've just become the unofficial Tom Cruise channel guest. I don't know why. I mean, it's because you're amazing.
Solidarity with the strikers as well, Tom.
But yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about Oppenheimer briefly, because I know you got to watch it. You watched it at the Science Museum on Tuesday last week. So
yes.
we've both seen it in 70mm IMAX, which we'll be talking about. And one thing I'm going to put early for people that are watching, please actually comment what format you watched it on, because I'm going to be talking about the various ones I've seen on to give some discussion on that. But because it's the first time we've had you on, I guess, for a Nolan video, I mean, I know what your favorite Nolan film is, but just for the people at home that might not, maybe let them know your favorite Nolan film, but also just your thoughts on him as a director. And I guess heading into Oppenheimer, whether you're excited, what you knew about it. I'm very curious about how this has been.
Well, for me, and anyone who's ever followed me on any socials will know, my favorite Nolan is The Prestige. I love that film. I think maybe because I was obsessed with it in 2008 when Dark Knight was coming out, and I was like, had it on DVD. I just watched it every day. I was like, this film is so deep, it's so good. And the thing with Nolan is it's so obvious to go, he's one of the greatest living filmmakers. Yeah. When people go, who's your favorite director? And someone says Nolan, they go, oh, it's such an obvious answer. It's like, yeah, but like, it's obvious for a reason. He's pretty good. Like, it's like if you go, who's your favorite director? Scorsese. It's like, yeah, but Scorsese's he makes good movies. He knows how to make a picture. There's a reason why they're it's like, what's your favorite film? Shawshank Redemption. Basic answer. Yeah, but it's basic for a reason. It's good. And Nolan is good. Like, whatever the critiques, and I've got some critiques of his work, they're bloody good. And the proof is, who else is getting these mega studio-backed budgets to make these mega massive movies, most of them original, And not only that, but packing out cinemas in the process. Nobody else is. The only person close is Jordan Peele, and I guarantee you his movies are half the budget. Nope, I guarantee was not as expensive as Oppenheimer is. And he's the only person coming remotely close to Nolan's level. And for whatever else is true of Nolan's work, that is remarkable. I mean, who else is making Inception movies? Who else is making Tenets? So it is kind of crazy. I get the complaints people have, but at the same time, I'm like, nobody. People say Tom Cruise is like the big champion of cinema, and it's like, no one's doing it quite like Nolan. Even Tom Cruise can't. I don't even think Tom Cruise has to make Mission Impossibles or Top Guns to get those budgets. And Nolan goes, I want to make a 3-hour IMAX part black and white biopic on a guy in a room in a suit going, like, she's going to get the money for that. So yeah, I'm a big Nolan fan.
Excellent. I mean, this is it as well, right? That you mentioned there, champion in cinema, and that's a big thing for me. And it's laughing you mentioned, when people say who's your favorite actor. So everyone knows he's mine. In that sense of, I don't even want to say it's a certain demographic, but September 2012 is when I started A-level film, and on that first day, every single person had to go around and say their favorite film and director. Now, mine was probably one of the deadliest combos of Star Wars and Christopher Nolan. And at this point, obviously, Disney hadn't bought Lucasfilm. And there wasn't a reaction as such, but it was one of those things where you started hearing other people's taste here over the directors. But at that point, okay, Dark Knight Rises just come out, and he's done 4 films since now, so he would have done 8 films at that point in time. But there's already almost a generation that probably saw Dark Knight or around that time or getting to film where he was this, not even up and coming. He'd become a household name in an era where you weren't having directors become household names. I think that's why we're talking about this film today. And we'll talk about other things in regards to that later. And it is just incredible over the last, Dark Knight's the first film I saw, 15 years, I guess, of watching his films and following his career and the careers of others within his films that introduced me to. Cillian Murphy is one of the obvious ones. Obviously, we'll be talking about that a lot today. But you're right, absolutely everything you've kind of said, that no other director is going to get 100. Even before we knew this was an Oppenheimer film, when Christopher Nolan led the walkout from Warner Brothers, I know that Denis Villeneuve is still trapped there whilst he's got to make Dune films and he can't say anything. To lead that walkout and have every single studio going for you. And if anyone's not read the list of, I don't want to call them demands, but when you're in demand, you can set some pointers as to what you want to do. And if I can remember correctly, Universal couldn't have a film come out 45 days before or after Oppenheimer. It had to be the mid-July release date. It had to have, I think, a minimum 90-day window in theatrical before it can be released on home media or PVOD. And it was all these amazing things. And I remember seeing we know Twitter's a cesspool, but even these people back then, like a year or two ago, saying, who does he think he is? Well, he's the guy that a company's going to say yes. And 2 did. And I believe, really interesting heading into this, and really interesting, actually, I'm going to mention Apple. Apple was supposedly one of the final 2 with Universal that were going to get this film. And I've got to hand it to Apple that obviously 2 years ago this was officially announced, or around this point, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, maybe. Now we're in a situation where Apple are dropping Napoleon and Killers of the Flower Moon in cinemas, in IMAX, way before they're going to be on streaming. And I did think, and I was like, not, Apple's been cooking, but I've had a very weird weekend. I feel in a very good place with the industry. I say that, a good place with the industry. Injuries and tatters with the strikes. And again, full solidarity of everybody there. But in respect to the industry, is looking healthy to the audiences. And fingers crossed for a lot of other things that should happen down the coming months. But where it kind of relates to Oppenheimer, heading into it, I'd love to know your thoughts. Because for me, I knew next to nothing about Oppenheimer. I knew this was the person involved in the Manhattan Project. I couldn't tell you anything about his life. I knew nothing except the fact that he's the guy. I wouldn't even say when this was announced, I knew that he's the man that created the bomb. I didn't know the Destroy a World speech, which everybody now says they do, which you probably do just in the film. But it's an interesting one that I was massive on history at school. And our subjects at GCSE were modern history. We did the 20th century like in full. starting, I guess, with the 19th century, the suffragettes, and all the way up to the Cold War, past the Cold War, ending the Cold War. And I didn't take it on at A level because it meant I couldn't do film. And I hated the syllabus. It was the Russian Baltics. But it's one of them where I was surprised at how little I knew. And that sounds really arrogant to say on a stream, which is why I'm quite grateful sometimes for films like this, because if your favorite director attaches himself to a project, that project suddenly becomes interesting. You know, I don't have it on my desk. It's on my bookshelf. I did go out and buy American Prometheus, which this film is based off. And I can say that I did not finish it. I got about 200 pages in, and I don't know why I never finished it. This was probably 2 months ago, and it was insane trying to read that. And listen, I'm not going to talk about how people can read and whatnot, but it felt like a paper put together, like through a university study. And you read about the origins of the book with the authors, how many decades it's been working on it, the people involved, how that, I think, 700-page book became only a 3-hour film is remarkable in its own right. And the accuracy from the little bits I know that were popping up in the early stages of this film, I was mesmerized by. But I'm just curious, your thoughts heading into Oppenheimer. I don't want to say the word hyped. Maybe you were hyped, but it is one of them.
Yeah, and you were saying about Apple just quickly. It's interesting. I think Coda really sort of boosted their confidence in their films, because now they're, you know, the fact that they were willing to stump up the money for Nolan, and they're funding Ridley Scott's Napoleonic epic and Scorsese's thing, you know, both, you know, and frankly, Oppenheimer, Killers, and Napoleon will all be going head to head for Oscars. I know we'll talk about that later, but they are all going to be positioned for the big awards. It's quite interesting that he was quite drawn to Apple. I'm glad he went with Universal, maybe because it's an old studio. I think that might have been what clinched it for him, is that it's like, yeah, but Universal are one of the big classic studios. Didn't use the era appropriate logo, loses points. If you make a film in the past, you've got to use the era appropriate studio logo. That's what I like to see. But, you know, going into this, going into any Nolan, I'm intrigued, because you know that it's going to be something spectacular. He's kind of a franchise unto himself. Like, he gets as much hype for his stuff as like Marvel or DC or, you know, whatever franchise. People pick apart his, you know, there are whole, you know, hour-long trailer breakdown discussions for a film about, you know, an event that happened 100 years ago, and it's like, but we know what's going to happen. It's a historical event, you know. And the same thing happened with Dunkirk, and it's like, again, we know what happened at the end of it. They got off the beach. That's why we're telling the story. So it is kind of crazy that he is his own franchise, and I don't. And you know, his list of demands when he walked out from Warner Brothers. The only other time I can think of that is when Tarantino obviously wasn't going to work with the Weinsteins, obviously because of, you know, the Me Too movement, and he kind of said, who's gonna fund my next movie then? And every studio basically was like, we will. What do you want? Let us know. And he had the pick of the litter. And I don't think any other, Tarantino and Nolan are maybe the only two. Maybe because there are so few directors now who are like names. But even when you're in an age where Scorsese's got to shop his ideas around, which is depressing to think that he's got.
Oh, I don't know if we've lost Paul. It's hard to tell because we are live. But right, I'm gonna try and continue this. So if I talk Nolan very briefly, I'm gonna try and move off into talking past that. I'm gonna try and cover it from the branding stuff, and then as soon as we get Paul back, we can run with that, find out what's going on. But just following in regards to the brands, I'm 100% with him that there are not enough directors left who are not even just creating original things. They are going in for the industry. They are putting the cinematic experience as a priority for the audience at home and a lot of other people. Even so much for me talking this film, who can turn up, as we said, go to Apple, go to these other brands and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to shoot this film this way. These are my requirements. Now we know fundamentally how Christopher Nolan films operate. Non-linear narrative. We're going to go through all the narrative structures, and the worst possible time to do is, Paul, is we're going to talk about experiences watching the film. So I'm going to very quickly go through mine. I'm actually going to save Barbenheimer until Paul returns. But I got to see this at the BFI IMAX on Friday. This was at 8 a.m. in the morning. Yes, that is not a typo. My day began at 4 a.m. I drove down to London. I think we have Paul returning. We have a Paul returning. Not a problem. No, it's all good. I was trying to carry on talking about the Nolan brands. I'm just talking about the day watching it. So we'll jump to you just after me. So I'm going to talk about Friday. So BFI IMAX. Now the tickets this went on sale out the blue in the UK. It hit midnight. I can't remember what day. And I was on Twitter, very luckily on Twitter, because I was about to go to sleep. And the BFI IMAX tweet saying Oppenheimer tickets are on sale now. And I have not leapt a laptop to buy a ticket for a film since probably No Way Home. And that was the responsibility of booking for a group more so than myself. But I've always said the BFI IMAX and a Nolan film is almost like Mecca, right? That you have to make that journey. And if you are a descendant of that, don't mean to make religious comparisons, but I will be at the BFI IMAX for the opening of a Nolan film. I've not seen every Nolan film there. I've seen The Dark Knight there. That was in 2018 on the week of its 10th anniversary. The week I got offered my first job in the film industry, watching the film that made me want to do film, which was very eerie, and that meant a lot. I saw Dunkirk there, of course, which is the film I viewed the most in cinemas alongside Top Gun Maverick. I saw Tenet at the BFI IMAX twice as well. But I was like, Oppenheimer, I'm going to be that opening. And then I saw they were showing it at midnight, at 4 a.m., at 8 a.m., at 12 p.m., at 4 p.m., at 8 p.m., and again and again and again on loop. This film is being shown on loop there. Of course, 70mm IMAX. He has spoken about in the past, it's one of his favorite cinema locations. I think the press screen with the junket screenings were there this time round. The press screenings had been there in the past for his other films. But yeah, starting a day at 4 a.m. on Barbenheimer, got there at 8 a.m., got contacted to say that there'll be no adverts because it's on reel and it's 3 hours long and you might have seen stuff online. Skipped doing any photos. I'd rocked up in the black suit as part of Barbenheimer. And there were adverts, so I could have actually had a photo all along. And then just talking my initial thoughts on that first viewing, very, very briefly, and I'll say this. So this is why I haven't done Barbenheimer. I was so emotionally wiped after watching this film. And I kind of said this, and I've struggled to explain it. And it's even worse to do it live on a stream. But something happened at the end of that film where I sort of, as the credits hit, there were just tears going down my eyes. Now, I'm used to crying at films, but I wasn't sad. I wasn't reacting to a moment or an individual person or something that was said. I was in this weird, vulnerable state that I've never seen a film in. And I had a plan B to watch Barbie. I was meant to go with a friend from work who was ill. That got rescheduled, but I was going to go straight to Leicester Square as a plan B to still watch it at the Cineworlds. And that was going to take place 50 minutes after our screening finished. The screening finished, on Friday, the plan B. And I couldn't bring myself to watch Barbie. I was so wiped in my head. I was like, there is no way I can sit down. There's no way I can consciously get on that tube. Yes, it's only 3 stops, Leicester Square from Waterloo, but there's no way I can look at all these people smiling and enjoying themselves. I didn't realize there was the strike as well in Leicester Square, actually, so I missed out on seeing Brian Cox. But I went home, and I sat there in the car driving back from Barnet to where I live, had the soundtrack on, and I was just sat there in silence the entire time. I had to make a few calls to talk to people about a few things, but I've never experienced this at cinema. I went home and I slept. I literally wiped myself out. I was asleep for like 3 hours. I woke up at like 7 o'clock, 6:30 that night, went out after, went home, slept early. And then I had 2 more showings booked for Saturday and Sunday, which I'll talk about in a little bit of time. But obviously I've not partaken in Barbenheimer due to being, I guess we could say, too depressed after watching this film. But Paul, I want to get your story because we've got you back on now. As I mentioned, you saw this at the Science Museum. So that's is that the 3rd biggest cinema in the country? showing
I
it.
think so. I think so. I think
That
it must be.
BFI, Manchester Printworks, and the Science Museum are the only, I know for sure, the only three in the country showing it on 70mm IMAX. So anyone that can get to any of those three cinemas, do try. I'm going to talk about formats a little bit later on. But how was that experience viewing it on Tuesday? And you'd seen Barbie the day before as well. So I'm curious about going from Barbie into Oppenheimer.
Yeah, so I went to the press showings of Barbie and Oppenheimer. I was very fortunate. Um, anyone who's seen a minor viral video of me having an argument with a man with a megaphone about Barbie, I can only apologise. He, I don't normally. I know that I'm quite a grumpy person. He was shouting into it right next to my ear. Was my complaint, and then we got into an argument over Barbie, which I liked. Just putting it out there, I enjoyed Barbie. And then, yeah, the next day I got to see Oppenheimer at the Science Museum on the print, and it was interesting. Beforehand, Edith Bowman, one of the loves of my life, came out and introduced it, and she said, listen to the actual projector startup. She said you have to listen for that. And so there was I've never experienced this. There was dead silence in the room. And literally, when you heard the whirl of the projector start up, everybody just went, ooh. I was like, it's a projector, guys. But it did sound cool. And watching it was kind of insane because, the IMAX, both the Waterloo and the Science Museum, the actual seating is quite small. So, because the screen's so big and the thing's so small, it is kind of it's intense. And, seeing it on the print, the way, seeing it exactly how Nolan intended, I'm a bit skeptical of when people go cinema experience. I'm a bit, but even I was like, no, I need to see this on IMAX. I need to see this the way Nolan wants it to be seen. And I think I've seen all of his films on IMAX. I did a Dark Knight all-nighter where you see Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, and funnily enough, it was so sold out. I went with my wife, and the only two seats we had were at the very front, so we were basically lying down watching it. And when the truck flips, it is intense. And this one is, I think, it's also just because I think because of the sound as well. You need to sit in IMAX, not just for the picture, which is, Nolan knows how to shoot a film, but the sound, and which is weird to talk about in a Nolan film after Tenet, which had awful sound, which was some of the worst sound mixing ever. It's like he got sick of hearing that complaint and went, right, this next one's going to have the best sound you've ever heard in your goddamn life, and you're going to leave me alone. Because I thought the sound in it was insane. There were some moments in it where genuinely my brain was rattling from just the intensity of, the sound. And sometimes, and also the silences. He uses sound in it, and I think you need to be in the biggest, loudest cinema possible to just sort of let Nolan fry your face off, frankly. He kind of does.
I'm with you, and I'll talk that. So BFI IMAX Friday for me, 70mm IMAX. Yesterday, I went to my nearest IMAX, normal IMAX laser, digital. And today, I watched it on a normal screen, no IMAX. And I think I worked this out. It's the first time since Dark Knight Rises that I've seen a Nolan film in non-IMAX. And the reason I did that, and it wasn't a snobby thing, right? I could sit here and come on a stream and say, go watch it in the IMAX. I do that every week to the films I think should be seen in IMAX. The experience for this film is one of the best IMAX experiences I've ever had. And you've sort of hit the nail on there. One of the reasons why is the sound. And I thought you were going to mention the word 4D. And I'm not talking 4DX, that nonsense. I'm talking seeing this yesterday and Friday in the IMAXs. I don't know what on earth is the difference there. Maybe it's the screens I was in. But the sound felt like a character in the sense of the rumbles and the vibrations of the building, of the seats, not just what is on screen, everything. The scene of the steps, which I think everyone's going to talk about. I could not believe how not innovative, because it's not. I don't think it's that, but the word sort of loses me, and I just keep thinking it's almost been designed to that point that they want this effect on the audience. And a big thing I've noticed with this film, and it's on the poster behind me which I put up, and it's actually in the credit. It doesn't say written and directed by Christopher Nolan. His credit now says written for the screen and directed by Christopher Nolan. And I feel like we are getting this oomph of you've got to go to the cinema to see this. And I think when it is the correct filmmakers telling you to go see their film on the big screen, that's when you know. And Tom Cruise is, of course, one of those. But one thing that was disappointing, I'll say, the new Mission Impossible, is that they didn't actually shoot an IMAX aspect ratio. And it does make a big difference when you're watching a film in IMAX. And the fact that they were able to repurpose the IMAX cameras in this film, Hoyt van Hoytman on cinematography again, who every time you hear Nolan talking about, I mean, he's worked with Jordan Peele, who spoke about tonight as well. He can just casually just pick up an IMAX camera and shoot handheld. These are whopping devices.
He's a great big
you've got Robert
Scandi Viking. That's what. Have you seen what he looks? Have you seen what he looks like? He's a great.
He's an absolute unit.
He looks like a drummer from a heavy metal band dressed all in black. So when he goes, I just pick it up. You're like, yeah, all right. I reckon, yeah, you could probably carry the entire cast. Jeez, he's a hefty unit.
And it's how practical he makes it. But with this one, there was something different about that sound, and that's why I think I'm using today's viewing, the third viewing, not to slate non-IMAX, because I understand some people might not want to travel out far. They might not have one near them. They might not be able to afford to go. All of that are very reasonable and understandable, but it felt less interactive. And I know it's not an interactive film, but when I saw it today, right, and you get the boom after the test Trinity. In the other screens, I've sort of felt like there was a literal wave where you could feel your body going back, like you'd hear it across the room, going through everyone. But this themselves, I was like, oh, it's just a noise. I didn't feel involved, and that's, I guess, my luxury of having seen it at the venues I have first. But the other thing I'll say of the IMAX is that this is the first. I mean, I know that people will say you lose the image at the top and bottom. People will laugh at some of these. What does Disney Plus call it? IMAX approved aspect ratio, where they've just took the rectangular image and cropped it to be a square and then said it's now IMAX when it never was. This is shot for IMAX. This is shot for 70 million. Certainly the Mushroom Cloud, which we'll talk about later, that was a square. And I think that would have been the same view of that 70 mil IMAX. It was a square image. You saw the top of the cloud. You saw the smoke at the bottom. That looked so much better on Friday than any of the other screens I've been to. And I just think this is the one film, maybe of the year, maybe of the last few years, where I say, you have to see this at IMAX, because this isn't a film for explosions, for big sound effects. It's almost a 3-hour film of people just talking with one another. It's not got an intense, overly loud score, which people could say Nolan uses too much. As you mentioned, the sound mixing is incredible. But even having IMAX frames of just Cillian Murphy staring into the lens, there's something haunting about it. And when I sort of spoke earlier about being like emotionally overwhelmed by the whole film, I certainly felt that on Friday. And yesterday's viewing was even weirder, because when the film started, the shots of it in the rain, I just felt a bit emotional again. And then I was fine, and I didn't react to the end of the film. And today I didn't react really at all. And I'm just wondering, was it that experience thing on Friday that's made it different to the viewing since? I don't know. But what are your thoughts, I guess, on, I know we've sort of jumped it by chucking it now, but just the IMAX, like, is this where people should be watching it? Like, would you watch it again in a non-IMAX format?
I do want to see it again. I probably will just go to a normal cinema just because it's easier for me. But it's interesting that, the first time Nolan dabbled in the IMAX was with The Dark Knight in 2008. And then in 2009, you get James Cameron's Avatar with the 3D. And everyone was pushing 3D as, you got to do it in 3D, you got to do it in 3D. And Nolan brilliantly was like, no, IMAX. And people were like, IMAX 3D. And he's like, no, just IMAX. Just IMAX. And I don't care how
got it right, though.
And I don't care how many people's backs I have to break. I don't care how many times Anne Hathaway has to drive into my IMAX camera. I'm doing IMAX. And, I think I reckon we're maybe 1-2 more films away from him doing a film that's entirely IMAX ratio. Because, he started out, he had little sections, the opening of Dark Knight and the big truck chase with the truck flips, which is such a great moment. And then Inception had big IMAX set pieces. And then Dark Knight, you had the opening 15 minutes in IMAX. And then and each time he's kind of built more and built more. I reckon eventually he's going to go, we're shooting the whole thing with an IMAX camera. It's going to be huge as hell the whole time. And I do think that few filmmakers, and I would say Jordan Peele is kind of maybe second for this, knows how to use an IMAX camera, not just to emphasize spectacle, which he does, because, like I say, the truck flip in Dark Knight is one of the most iconic superhero moments in a film. You know, some of the stuff in Interstellar where you're in the vastness of space, it's gorgeous. But with this film, it's just looking at his face. And you might think, well, I could just look at Cillian Murphy's face any size, and it's like there's an intensity to you've got Cillian Murphy 50 times bigger than he'll ever be, and it's just in on his face and his eyes. And what's great about it is that you get to enjoy his performance all the more because you're following him. You know, you follow him from like 20 until at one point you see him and he's like 69 or however old Oppenheimer was towards the end of his life. So you're following him for 40 odd years, and you get to see that face change over the years. And those scenes where he's just sat in a chair and, you know, Jason Clarke's questioning him, there's that picture of him just like that. That's like a minute long shot of just his face and then the sounds. And it's hard to convey it in an image. But as the camera just looks at him, you know everything that's going on in his head through the sound. And it's hard to convey in words what the sound of the film does to you, because it's not just, you know, the explosions are loud and the shouting is loud, but it's the quiet moments that really hit home. The moments where people don't say something, where they can't say something. You know, there are certain, you know, when there's a whole thing about, you know, obviously light travels quicker than sound. You know, so when you're dealing with the bomb stuff and you get the blow before you get the sound. I mean, there were jump scares in this film, frankly, because of how loud the loudness was, that I think you will lose. You'll still get a lot out of it from, you know, you'll get a lot out of it when you watch it at home because it's a well-made film, and a good film should work whether you watch it on your phone or you watch it on your TV or you watch it in the cinema. A good film will work regardless, but there is something about the sound that you just need to let the film shake you, and it does shake you. I think personally, it shook me emotionally, but it also shook me just physically in my seat. I was, you know, it's the closest I've ever gotten to a 4DX film, because I don't really buy in. I don't. If I wanted to go to Disneyland, I'd go to Disneyland. But you know, it was intense. It was really intense.
No, that's a good point. I kind of want to take on the IMAX thing as well. That I think I could be wrong. I need to double check. I believe that the entirety of Dunkirk was intended to be shot on IMAX, but the camera wouldn't fit in the boat, the Moonstone, in which Mark Rylance's story arc is in. So if anyone's ever rewatching Dunkirk, whenever it goes to the boat, camera, you see the ratio crop downwards. It's because they couldn't get the camera on, which is so typical of Nolan. But yeah, I think you're not wrong. I think there'll be a time, and now that because what they spoke about with Oppenheimer is it's the first time they've been able to do close-ups with an IMAX camera. Now that sounds absurd, but they've clearly, again, I mean, I know they've designed the black and white IMAX camera, which hadn't been done before. Zack Snyder's shaking in his boots because apparently that's a black and white IMAX film when it clearly wasn't all those years ago. # don't release the Justice League cut. There's new technological advancements, and I think having IMAX on dialogue scenes in boardrooms, 15 years ago, someone would have been like, what's the point? Whereas now it's like, yeah, like give me more IMAX. Robert Downey Jr. walks into a big room and it cuts an IMAX camera. Yeah, that's quality. I want more. And it makes me think that that's going to happen soon, that at some point in Nolan's career, he will have an IMAX film 70mm camera that can do the entirety of a film, whether it's quiet, whether it's loud, whether it's action, whether it's not. And I'm very curious the day that comes. Maybe it'll be his next project. Who knows? But certainly I feel that he has developed this technology, as again, what you said, you know, beginning in 2008 with The Dark Knight, the short amount of minutes. And I had this moment of reflection yesterday, and I was like, I'm sure that IMAX would have eventually been picked up by a director if he hadn't done The Dark Knight, right? In theory. But knowing there are hundreds and hundreds of these cinemas around the world, because of one director that's pushed this format more than anybody else. And I mean, I know that James Cameron's an advocate for modern tech. I know that obviously he's only done 2 films since Avatar's. I mean, I know that he did the Titanic documentary was IMAX, I believe.
Yeah.
So he'd been involved from a documentary standpoint. But I don't think there's been any other director genuinely pushing this format aside from those two, and kind of Nolan just more for quantity, of how many films he's been able to do in this time. And I would love for some more directors, not saying that some directors can't use them, but as you mentioned, Jordan Peele, Nope looked phenomenal in IMAX last year. And that was a film that was slept on for that. And it doesn't have to be a big blockbuster film to use IMAX. The problem is now that the blockbuster films are booking out the IMAX exclusive screens for weeks in advance, knowing they've got a film that was never even touched with an IMAX camera. They just want the premium format for themselves. I won't get into the Mission Impossible conversation. I know that Oppenheimer's got it booked for 3 weeks worldwide. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's back in IMAX as soon as they can get it back in. But even the BFI where I was at, every screening was sold out this weekend, including 4 a.m. screenings. So anyone curious, that is a cinema like that being sold out. Dave in the comments, what an experience it was. Being a packed cinema made this even better. And that was it. Yesterday, my cinema was sold out. Today, my cinema was sold out. I didn't think you'd ever get this for, again, a biopic of the stature. Normally, it's sold out for your Spider-Mans, your Bonds, your Avatar opening days. An Oppenheimer biopic, and it's sold out everywhere. What a time to be alive for the industry. And kind of sitting with that, we talk about Nolan a lot, but technically this is the direction point we're going to talk about now. I want to talk the narrative structure, which is where the key of a lot of the direction is going to come in. I'd read before the film came out, and I'm not necessarily know what I had, but everyone knew from day one this film had been shot on black and white alongside being shot in color. And obviously, when you watch the film, they don't name it; they call it, I think, fusion and fission.
Yeah.
Black and white is Robert Downey Jr.'s point of view. Color is Oppenheimer's point of view, which is, some might think it's a gimmick. I don't think it is. I think it's actually, I don't want to call it a genius narrative structure, because genius is where it's going to probably get thrown around too much these days. But the choice of narrative for a biopic, it could have been so easy to do A to B to C, pre-atomic bomb, during Manhattan Project, ending it with the politics. But they're able to create tension from the get-go and build up this story of Oppenheimer of straws. And we'll talk about the cast in a bit so we can really get into Robert Downey Jr. But I loved the narrative structure for this. And it's 3 hours long. Can't forget that as well. 180 pages. I believe Nolan said from day one he spoke to IMAX. Before they even began filming, they knew they were locked at 3 hours maximum. That's the maximum they could ever have on IMAX film reel. So the runtime has been locked in. I think it's 3 hours and 8 seconds to be precise. What did you think of his choice for that narrative structure? And I guess the core stories being told. I know that's an overstatement just to say that the main stories, but just before we get into the cast, which will start answering some of that too, I guess.
Yeah, for me as well, I think it's, Nolan likes to mix up times and layer things in and stuff. And, I think The Dark Knight is his only film that doesn't involve some kind of flashback. I think that's his only film that doesn't involve any. It's his only linear film, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But for me, it made sense because in a way, it's like a memory. And when you remember something, in psychology, not to get all true crimey, but the way you can tell if someone is lying in true crime situations is that they just go A to B to C. Whereas when you are remembering something, you often go A to C. I forgot B. B. Wait, no, there was an A. That was actually B, because there's actually something I forgot before that. And that's kind of what this does. It's like a memory of this happened. No, wait, hang on. This happened. Then this happened. Then this happened. And it's that kind of idea that everything's kind of falling in on itself. The weight of it's falling on Oppenheimer as his memories, the whole thing about him being sort of hauled up by this sort of court, and his memories are kind of being picked over. So it kind of makes sense that things are happening in tandem at the same time. We go back to when he was 20, then where he's 40, then he's 30, then it's this. And yet I never felt confused by it. I kind of, not just through the performances, and also, basic film stuff, like he has different hairstyles in different times.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's got kind of crazy hair when he's 20, and then he's got kind of just normal hair, and then he's got even shorter hair. You know, that's basic filmmaking of just give them longer hair when they're younger. Makes more sense. Like that kind of thing.
He looks young though, and you know what? I know there's a bit of de-aging, there's up-aging. Cillian Murphy, I think, is in his late 30s or mid 40s. I can't actually remember. That's terrible.
He's about the 40 mark.
Yeah, when he is meant to be a student, he looks like a student, and I don't think it is just the haircut. There's something about how they're able to capture it, whether it's makeup as well. But at no point did I ever feel like, oh, they've gone so far out of Cillian Murphy that he's now become this character in makeup. I know that we might mention that with a certain president that's got a role in this, but it's one of those where the aging is just amazing. And when he gets that final scene, and you see him aged up into his 60s, that hit hard. And I don't know why, because they'd intentionally, clearly not wanted to reveal him in his 60s until they needed to for one scene, the closing scene for the rest of the cast. And I just thought, I'm the same as you, that I didn't feel confused. And it's interesting of Nolan that, you know, so many people will hear about stories, oh, you know, Memento is confusing, Inception, Tenet, blah, blah, blah. And I do fully understand that. I came out of the first viewing of Tenet, didn't have a single clue what happened. Second viewing was like lightning strike. Every single thing clicked into place. And I've not experienced that before. And I still don't know how that happened. And I did go a bit insane. I would say till 3 a.m. drawing notes on structures and timelines and whatnot.
Turned into the Charlie Day meme.
I did. I actually still have the notes at the bottom of my desk now. It's 11 pages. And it was just, I even like color coded it red and blue like the film, which was insane. But I just felt like this, that there was obviously, I hate this conversation. A lot of people have been talking, saying that the end of this film was always going to be the I become Death Destroyer of Worlds, because of the TV speech being so iconic, not because of that point of it in his life. And yes, the typical Nolan voiceover, narration, ending, montage. I'm so glad it wasn't that. And I just kind of need to tell people to grow up, to those that are annoyed it wasn't, because I've hit this tedious point with when I look at YouTube videos, when I read reviews, and it seems like the art of discussing a film is not dying. I'm not the best at doing it. I'm not arrogant. But some people can't confuse what they wanted to happen versus what has happened. And I can understand disappointment. I've been there with films myself. And no doubt there'd have been times where I've said, oh, this should have happened or that should have happened. But there are certain people in every film, oh, this didn't go the way I wanted it to go, so therefore I dislike this film. And I'm just sat there, and, you know, the one thing I always say is just go get a job and make a real fucking film yourself. And they never do, because they can't. And it's listen, I've seen that a lot, and it happened again with this one, where it's like, really, like the final scene wasn't what you wanted the final scene to be.
What did you want? What did you want? Like a montage thing, and it's like the end of the Dark Knight, where he goes, "A Dark Knight."
Literally,
goes,
I feel like everyone. I feel like everyone wants that, and I don't. And
I'm glad they
worked
did
for the Dark Knight so well. Same, because that isn't the film they're telling. That's not the story they're telling. It was never telling the story of that moment. This is telling the story of his life, and really, the plot, which caught me off guard. So much more of this is the politics than I thought it would be, and I'm grateful for that. And this is someone that isn't. I mentioned I loved history at school. We didn't study a lot of American politics, thank God. So that was a very fierce turn. You know, I have bought this weekend after hearing a lot about it. JFK, I love Oliver Stone. I've never seen this, so I'm going to try and watch this at some point this week. Probably next weekend, actually, the runtime. But I wanted to know more about what happened to him. Why is this somebody that isn't spoken about, that in theory should, right? We talk about Einstein, we talk about these amazing scientists with their discoveries, and I know Nolan's done this a lot in his promos over the last year or two, but he said, you know, he's one of the great scientists that isn't known. And I have wondered, it's like, why didn't we know? And of course, you read into a bit of McCarthyism, as I have done, you know, with the book as well, a few other things, but I was curious to know what happened, that this person is almost unknown until now. And I'm not saying, oh, no one had heard of him. I'm going to tell you all right now that this, under the age of 40, very, very few people would have heard of Oppenheimer until this film was announced, let alone they saw the film. If I'm waffling, sorry, I'd love to get your thoughts on that sort of bit as well.
No, I think it is as well, that the scientists that we do know all created things that we like like Einstein, his theory of relativity. Well, that's good. That's a good thing. Charles Darwin, evolution. That's a good thing. Isaac Newton, gravity. That's a good thing. The atom bomb is not a good thing. It's quite literally possibly the worst thing anyone's ever made, outside of possibly dubstep. No, that's a cheap joke. But it's awful. It's I cannot think of anything worse than the atom bomb and using it. And the film kind of gets into what it was the best of a bad situation, because he does the whole thing about saying, I don't know if America should have this bomb, but I know the Nazis shouldn't. And you're like, I get it. It's
yeah. It's a race. The race going to happen.
Yeah, but I'm just not sure. I think that's why. I think because it's such an awful thing, that's why people are like, let's just pretend it never happened. So the effects of it, but you don't know the guy who did it, because it just doesn't bear thinking about, I guess. Which is also, I think, why, similar to that, Hitler wasn't the guy who came up with the final solution. He okayed it, but he didn't come up with it. And most people, I would say, if you went up to someone and said, who came up with the final solution, exterminate the Jews, they go Hitler. Hitler didn't come up with it. He okayed it. He laid the groundwork for it, but he didn't okay it. He didn't come up with it. Somebody else did. And we don't, most people wouldn't know. And that's because it's something I don't think we can sort of process. So we just kind of go, no, we don't want to know. Yeah. And that's why Oppenheimer's not Einstein, not Charles Darwin.
It's a good point, and kind of in line with it, the film explores on some of that, I guess, as well. And I think that the one bit that sort of took away is I know it's way jumping ahead to the scene with Gary Oldman playing Truman, but the White House scene is remarkable. And I think what this film juggles with, and if we sort of talk about, I guess, the cast as well, we'll start with Cillian playing Oppenheimer. I know nothing. I mean, I was terrible at science at school. And I was like an all-rounder, right? Pretty much straight B's, a couple of A's, a couple of C's. Science was something I detested. Ironically, I was good at maths, which doesn't really make sense. But
if it wasn't creative, when it got into I'll tell you that much.
But it was just sort of watching this and the performance, and I know people would go to specific scenes, but Cillian in this entire film, and when you've read this in the cast talk about him outside of it, that he struggled with the weight of this role as well, knowing it was a lead in a Nolan film, knowing the importance of the science of this person. I thought I came out of this film emotionally floored. I could not imagine the performance. Reading that book, I know that Cillian said that he's read the I forgot the name of the scriptures, but he'd been reading a lot, doing a lot of research into this. I know that they spoke on set that he wouldn't join them for the dinner, that he was. They haven't said struggling, they haven't said method acting. It's none of that. It is just the weight of a role as such as this. And the more you read into his life, again, I only read the first 200 pages of the book. Even that is heavy within itself. And to take on a mantle such as this, I've got to hand it to Nolan for casting Cillian. The second that photo came out, Cillian Murphy in the black and white, in the hat, with the cigarette in the mouth, you knew that they're cooking, that something's going to come from this. And I have seen a lot of Cillian Murphy performances. I'm a massive fan of his work. I would immediately, and I've seen it a couple of times, it's the opening weekend, I would instantly call this his best performance. Someone might disagree, of course, they rightfully can. Peaky Blinders, 6 seasons, is a film still to come. But it's one of those where I just felt like he transformed into this character, into this person. And he didn't just capture the vulnerabilities of him. He captured everything about him, the enigma behind him, his arrogance, some very comedic scenes, when certainly the physical performance as well, not just the fact he got very thin for this role. Whenever he'd see it like another scientist, he has this sort of terrifying grin on his face. And there's just always something about his performance in this where I just felt like something had clicked between them. Now, it's the sixth film between Nolan and Cillian. Obviously, the first time Cillian's led a Nolan film, which is quite kind of remarkable when you think about it being the sixth time together. But I look at this now, maybe because the film's come out, maybe because I've seen that book cover, which almost looks like the photo from Kinnear. I don't think I could have imagined another actor playing him in a Nolan film, at least. It feels so on point from the get-go. The opening shot of him staring into the puddle of the rain to the final scene of him talking with Einstein. I'm just going to say it. I feel like we've already seen the Oscar for Best Actor for next year. I know it's too early. It's his film. This is it. This is the defining performance for this duo as a director and actor, right? Is that unfair to say?
It's one of those performances as well. He manages, and part of it's writing, part of it is writing, part of it is the performance. He captures the contradictions. This is a guy who's a bit socially awkward, and yet people want to be around him. He's a guy who had multiple affairs. Every time you see him with a woman, the woman is hanging on his every word. And you're like, all right, there's got to be something about this guy, because
Pete Davidson. Joking.
I mean, Cillian Murphy's a good-looking guy. He's got the eyes, and the eyes. Nolan loves Cillian Murphy's eyes. He's even said that he argued with David S. Goyer about, does Scarecrow need the mask, because literally anytime you see him, he wears the mask for about 5 seconds as the Scarecrow, and then he rips it off because he was like, no, he's got these eyes. I want to see the eyes. And this film is all Murphy eyes. It's all in his eyes, and he captures that. He is quite, in certain scenes, he's actually very funny. Like, I know people say that, Nolan is humorless. He's not humorless. He's got a very dry sense of humor. I think that's where people might not. He's got a very British sense of humor. His humor is very deadpan, and there's a lot of very deadpan humor in this film. I think the biggest laugh is "Let's go get us some scientists," which made the entire screen I was in laugh. But there is, he is a funny character. He's also incredibly frustrating. And the film and Murphy capture that thing where you're just like, will you just, when you watch him being interrogated for being an apparent communist, and his wife, God bless Kitty, is literally like, why won't you fight them? And you're there going, yeah, why won't you fight them? Just friggin' fight this thing. And he's like, I need to protect the other people. And it's like, F the other people, man. F the other people. They don't care about you. So he's got this moral compass, but at the same time, he's got a very weird moral compass. I'm going to create this thing, but I don't think we should use it. We should take he basically says, build an entire town on land that is not ours. And then at the end, they go, what do we do with this town? Give it back to the Indians. His words, not mine. I would say Native Americans. He says, give it back to them. And it's like, but then why take it in the first place? Don't use the bomb. Why make it in the first place? Like, there's so many contradictions that you just want to, at times I was like,
it's what the brother says. You want to like strangle him.
You do. You just want to be like, will you just do the obvious thing? And then he doesn't. And I think, that's a classic. I mean, I know he's a real person, but that's such a Nolan character. Nolan's obsessed with the obsessed. He loves, Batman is an obsessed man. Leonard Shelby in Memento, obsessed. Will Dormer. Prestige. Will Dormer in Insomnia, he's obsessed. They're obsessed. Cooper in Interstellar, he's obsessed. They're all obsessed about something. And this is like the ultimate obsessed guy. And I think it's fascinating. And, that's what Nolan does so well. He creates somebody who's full of paradoxes and full of contradictions, where you're like, oh, I get it. He's a good guy. And no, he's not a good guy, actually, because he just suggested taking a town away from Native Americans. That's awful, But then he says, oh, just get back to them. It's like, and Nolan basically, creates worlds where nobody's a hero, essentially, which is kind of the way the world is, And then, a few scenes that stood out for me by that is the bit where they're deciding which Japanese city to bomb. One of the best scenes in the film. And James Remar's character, I think he's Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State or something. They're like, these are the 6 most populous areas, so they're the best ones. And he goes, I'm taking Kyoto off. And they're like, why? And he's like, because me and my wife honeymoon there. And you're like, oh, that's all it takes, is it? You have a nice memory of a place, and so they get to live.
But it's so real.
But because you didn't decide, Nagasaki didn't have a cheaper hotel or something, they all have to die. It's that kind of thing. And that's one of those scenes. And the scene with President Truman, where, he kind of lays it down, where he goes, no one cares about you. He literally says to Oppenheimer, no one cares. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about me. And he says, Japan will hate me. They'll curse the name Truman. They won't care that you're Oppenheimer. No one cares. And as he leaves, he's like, don't let that crybaby into my office again. It's like,
it's true though.
It's so fascinating. And then when you get to like Robert Downey Jr.'s character, you kind of see that, I know a lot of people have complained that you don't see the effect it had on the Native Americans when they took the land away. You don't see the effect that it had on, the people of Nagasaki or Hiroshima when they dropped the bomb, things like that. But ultimately, you don't even really see the effect it had on people outside of those who wielded the power. The fact that the last third of the film isn't really even about Oppenheimer. It's about Louis Strauss and his insane obsession with one moment. Not even the biggest moment in history, which is when the bomb dropped. That's the biggest moment in history. And he could not give a flying fig. He cares that somebody didn't say hello. And you kind of just go, these men are insane. All of history is shaped by people who have a chip on their shoulder about some perceived slight. And Strauss's whole arc, that all he wanted was a hello from Einstein, and because of a conversation Oppenheimer and Einstein had, he went to destroy Oppenheimer, to destroy him. And in a great Nolan twist, conversation wasn't even about him. It wasn't even. It blows your mind, because you're just like, is that it? You're going to ruin a man's life because another guy didn't say hello to you?
It's one of them. And the second viewing on that, when you get to that scene, it's like 10, 15 minutes into the film. You're like, and Nolan loves this. He loves putting the ending of the film in as early as he can, right? And I always jump to Tenet. The ending of Tenet is like before the opening scene ever took place. Like, there's like a throwaway line from Michael Caine where he's like, a few weeks ago, a bomb went off. That bomb that went off was the ending of the film. And I love this kind of stuff. But the Straw stuff, Robert Downey Jr., I mean, we'll talk about him now. How have I've missed him on the screen. He has such infectious chemistry in every performance, even playing someone as sort of scummy as Straws in this. I just keep going to the final scene. I mean, Alden Ehrenreich as well. We've missed him too. I know we got to see him in Cocaine Bear. He got his return to the big screen this year. But I was so, because of the scale of this cast, there are ensembles, and there is this. There is this where Rami Malek pops up as a guy with a clipboard for like 20 seconds. He's like, I swear
he's like 5 words max.
Probably. And this was what was remarkable. And going back to last year, I remember when filming was on, like, every day, like, they'd add another like 5 cast members, and they're all like established actors that people know. And they're in the film for like 2 lines, 2 scenes. And it is quite incredible what's been put together. And I know that every actor will say, Christopher Nolan rings, you're not going to say no. And I know that Downey Jr. said that. And Robert Downey Jr. is amazing. And I can't sit here and say it's his best performance, not by a long shot. What I can tell you all is that I've really missed him outside of being Iron Man. I know he's kind of himself, but some of his performances, I guess, during Iron Man, pre-Iron Man, he is... I can't call him an underrated actor. I can't call him a forgotten actor. And I'm not going to criticize Marvel because it is the role that has defined his career. But he is a phenomenal his career actor.
From the toilet. But
exactly. And he's great in this. I've just got to say that. It's
one of those things that it is too early to predict Oscars. It is.
It is. Because and we're going to do it later.
Because what always happens is everybody, now will go, here's what's going to be Best Picture and Best Director. And then some film that I swear has only just finished filming that we've not even heard of will win Best Picture. Because who was predicting Coda for Best Picture? Who's predicting Parasite? And it comes and it storms the thing. But at this point in time, I don't know how they're going to position Ryan Gosling for Barbie. I don't.
That's what I've heard.
Because I think
They can
I'd make the argument he's the lead actor alongside Margot as lead actress. I'd make that case. I feel like Best Actor is probably now Cillian's to lose. And I would say supporting actor. I know that they'll probably want to push as many actors as possible, but the entire last third of the film it's Robert Downey Jr.'s movie, and he delivers a monologue, and it's full of anger and fury and frustration and disappointment. And, you know, I think he's great as Iron Man. Don't get me wrong. I think he's great. And I think some of his best acting as Iron Man and some of his best acting as an actor was in Civil War, because he does such a mix of emotions in that film, and that is a really good performance. But the stuff he does in the final third of this film, it is stuff I don't think you would have seen unless you've been watching stuff from the 80s that he was in. Not since Chaplin has he been given a role this complex. And the dynamic between Strauss and Oppenheimer reminded me of Mozart and Salieri and Amadeus. And, this idea that you have this one person who's, loved by everyone, or the toasted, Oppenheimer's not loved, but respected in this instance. And you have this other person who wants that so badly, and you kind of see it a little bit in something like the assassination of Jesse James, that Robert Ford's kind of, why isn't that me? Why am I not getting that same thing? And Robert Downey Jr. just manages to show this level of not even hate. I don't even think he hates him. It's just this kind of, why am I not in the inner circle? Yeah. Why am I not your guy? Why can't you just agree with me? And it's again, I think those two are all the performances, even the one scene people are great, but those two have the two most interesting. And it does kind of go back to The Prestige, that kind of idea that, the whole idea of The Prestige is a friendship that became a rivalry that turned deadly. And this is kind of the same thing. It's a friendship that became a rivalry that led to kind of somebody trying to torpedo another person. And I think it's Robert Downey Jr.'s. I think he must be a lock. I know that it's weird to say because anything can happen in the next 6-7 months. People were saying Jonathan Majors was the best actor to beat, and I don't think he is anymore.
That film is not coming out. That film's not going to get released, is it? And
because there was a lot of stuff about, he's going to be best actor for Magazine Dreams and best supporting actor for Creed 3. I think he's not anything for anything anymore, Mr. Majors. You've torpedoed that. Well done, sir. But I think Downey Jr.
kind of.
Wow.
And this is it with him, that he did that. He's done 2 interviews that people are crying about. Number one was he said he forgot what it was like to shoot a proper film because he had to have a camera on his lap in a car. And then you obviously put that in the feature. And then, of course, at the red carpet, before they got to go for the strike, he said, this is the best one I've ever been in. Now, some might say that's just promo, and he's well within his right to say that's a promo film, but he doesn't need to pick projects. He's not an actor that needs to work. He's very well off. And that's kind of what I like about him. That I know he did Doolittle, and my understanding is that it was his wife the producer, so that felt like a sort of tactical, I'll do it to help out type thing. This is his first role since then, aside from the great documentary Senior, which came out last year, which is what he made for his dad. Really recommend that for people on Netflix. And I've just missed his presence in the industry. Maybe that's a better term. That even at the end of the film, right, when he gets done, when he loses, and Old Narrite gives that great line. Because maybe, they were talking about something that was relevant. And as he steps through, he just does that smile. And you just know he's just got this natural charisma into any role he does. And it's been great seeing back. And I don't know if he's got roles prepared at the moment. He's very comfortable with his own life. I think he does a few documentaries of his own hobbies and stuff. But we've missed seeing him act. And you know what? It's bang on. It's a Nolan film. Get him on board. And I feel that became the message to a lot of people, because some insane names in this. Before we get to some of the ladies, let's talk Matt Damon. His second Nolan film after Interstellar. one of the greatest kept secrets in modern cinema history is Matt Damon in Interstellar. I will never forget that first viewing, what they were able to do to him.
Demon.
The crazy thing with this, he's almost in a comic relief role, right? And I know it's not a comedy at all, but the relationship, and again, this is credit to Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy's got amazing chemistry with every single person he interacts with in this film. There's not a single person, and for an ensemble film, it's even more incredible to have this effect. But Matt Damon, the moment he steps foot into this film, you think, okay, this guy's going to be a problem, and he's never actually that. And he's actually one of the characters where I feel the most sort of admirable about after watching it. You get to, I don't want to say a full character arc, but his relationship with Oppenheimer carries through to a really like touching end in the private hearing scene. But he's very funny in this. And what I'd seen is if you look at the real life photos of General Groves and Oppenheimer, not to discredit anyone, it looks like a Lauren Hardy sketch. You've got this stick thin person with his trouser waist up to his stomach, with the hat, the cigarette. And you've just got this big general with this, proper mustache. He's in his military uniform. It looks like a sketch between the two of them. And I love their back and forth throughout this film. And again, there's some very funny moments. Some of the scenes people are laughing at the most and the crowds have been in. We'll just kill him. Just kidding. Like, about the scientists that quit. And you sort of, people like laugh because it wouldn't surprise you if they would kill someone, right? That probably would happen in America. But their relationship, there's something going on there, and I really enjoyed Matt Damon in this. And again, I'm trying to avoid that Oscar talk, but I feel that if they wanted to negotiate, campaign a second person for supporting, they probably could do it with Damon. Again, we don't know what this Oscar is going to be like. Why? Because we don't even know if festival seasons are going to happen. With one of the first big films announced for Venice already delayed to next year, so we really are in a big predicament for next year. Of course, again, fully stand with the SAG, WGA, and any other unions are also going to get involved. But there's something about Matt Damon where I don't want to sit and say I missed it. I've not seen Air yet. I know Matt Damon's always had a presence. He's a wonderful actor, but he's great in this film. And I'll say that it doesn't feel like a typical Matt Damon performance. That he's come on board, happily played, not even second, like third, I think he's third billing in this. But he knows his purpose, and he said the same thing that everyone else said. When Chris Vernon calls, you don't say no. And I've read an article where he was on an acting sabbatical. He told his wife, I'll only take a job if it's a Nolan film. And he legitimately hadn't spoke to Nolan about this film. And he was then called during a sabbatical to say, can you do Oppenheimer? Which is incredible in his own respect. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Matt Damon in this?
See, I really liked his role as Leslie Groves. I think Matt Damon, especially as he's gotten older and he's gotten, I don't want to say fat. He's not fat, but he's a bit bigger than, when he was younger, he was very skinny.
He's not a kid anymore.
Yeah, as he's gotten a bit older and a bit more comfortable, he's very good at playing characters that are quietly cocky and comfortable in themselves. And you see it in Air, and I think of The Martian as well is a good example of that. And this as well, he's a guy that's like, yeah, all right. He's just kind of got that, you got this crazy scientist guy who's like, we need to build a town, and he's like, right, okay. And also it's the thing of he gets the rationale, and I think in a way he kind of sees the military the same way that Oppenheimer sees science, in that it's kind of a series of things you need to solve to get to an end goal. And I kind of like their dynamic. And, the whole thing of they're like, we need to get Niels Bohr out of Nazi occupation. And he's like, okay, we can't. And Oppenheimer's kind of doing the thing of like, oh, no, I understand that, but you need to. And he's like, yeah, no, I know, I get what you're saying, but no, we can't. It would be a suicide mission, and I'm not doing that. And, then a couple of scenes later, he literally arrives and goes, early Christmas present, it's Niels Bohr. And he doesn't even stay. He just leaves because he's like, these are science guys. I'm not a science guy. I'm an army guy. And, he does okay, let's recruit some scientists as they travel up and down the country. And, there's that kind of mutual respect thing, which I love in films. I love when two people who are chalk and cheese have a mutual admiration. And yeah, in that boardroom scene, you kind of see that thing where he was like, at no point did I ever question his integrity. And I think that's the kind of key to it, is that Groves sees Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's a difficult guy. He's an awkward man. He's a guy that, he doesn't like the army guys, but he kind of has a respect for Groves because Groves has a respect for him. And I think that is probably it's the most interest outside of Oppenheimer and Einstein. It's, the most interesting kind of friendship. By the end, I don't think they'd call each other friends. I don't think, but there's definitely a mutual respect. And that thing where he says, at no point did I ever question his loyalty to the United States, because he saw the guy tearing his hair out going, you have to build a town. If you don't build a town, you won't get the best scientists. And him going, all right, it's going to cost a lot of money though. Will it be up and running? And he's like, yeah, maybe. It's kind of, there is a lot of humor to be mined from that. And it's not making fun of the situation. It's making fun of human flaws, and the bureaucracy of war, because that's what a lot of it comes down to, is just this, okay, but I have to okay it with my superiors. And Oppenheimer's going, I don't really care about that. I just need you to do it.
Yeah. And that's kind of it. And in that boardroom, he said, like, they had that sort of farewell smile that Oppenheimer gives him, as like, thanks for trying to, give me a bit of defense. And even Groves saying, I wouldn't have cleared a single one of these people. And I think you get the weight that comes with it. And there's so much happening there. And listen, I'm not doing this nonsense about extended scenes. I would be so curious to know what is out there in the world on the editing floor. Now, I think it's a pretty tight script. I think Nolan tends to shoot as he wants. He's never released deleted scenes in his career, so don't ask for it, people. It's a waste of question. But there's so much going on with their relationship with each other that I really do enjoy it. And when they're on the trains together, even the scene with oh god, there's so many cast members. I forgot Colonel Parsh that Kate Affleck plays.
Yeah.
That like threat that I was like equally at the same time. Like even I felt scared. We haven't even mentioned Ludwig Göransson yet. The fact that this creepy Russian but not Russian but hates Russians American guy. There's some really incredible sequences within this own film, and just Matt Damon's reaction, like, wait, you met Colonel Parrish? Like, you should never meet him. And I love that it comes out in the meeting that, hey, he was looking out for him. He got him shipped off to London to get him off Oppenheimer's back, and there was these things in play. And it's and that's why I'm gonna, when we finish this, not as soon as I finish this today, but I am gonna get that book read, because I'm so curious to read more about the relationships of the people in the wartime. And I'd imagine there's a whole load of wealth of information that Nolan could have, picked and put into this screenplay. And moving on, we'll talk about Kitty and Jean, and then we'll just do a generic overview on someone, because I know we've been going there for an hour already. But I want to talk Emily Blunt, playing the role of Kitty. Now, I know that she's, of course, been in Quiet Place Part 2 with Cillian Murphy. Also starred in The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon, apparently they're next door neighbours, because if you didn't know, John Krasinski was on the entirety of the Oppenheimer press tour, which was the funniest thing in the world.
Did you not know that? Everyone's in everything.
He's probably there somewhere on set. And
I wouldn't even be shocked. I would not be shocked.
Just when he's thanking them all, there's all these people. I was like, no one's looking at the back row because they're trying to remember who's who at the front. But Emily Blunt, this now, the first viewing, I enjoyed her performance, but this is one of the more intriguing ones. At the first viewing, I didn't really take too much away from her in this film. You got a great moment at the end, which we'll talk about, but on repeat viewing, she's become, I mean, I can't fault pretty much anyone's performance in this film, I'm being completely honest, but the more I've seen this, the more my emotional side of it moves to the relationship with Kitty, which is quite remarkable for a character such as Oppenheimer, who had many mistresses over the years. But Emily Blunt in this film, I don't want to say she's underrated. That's how I viewed the first viewing, but actually one of my favorite performances in this is her. And the scene where they start flirting and it's her asking about quantum mechanics, my brain was probably frazzled on Friday, I won't lie, when they started talking, but their relationship's a really intriguing one for sort of how unfaithful Oppenheimer is, that she really does carry him through to the second half of the film. And when it does move from, at Manhattan Project story to boardroom politics, she still is at the end as far as I'm concerned. The two key moments, her dressing down in the boardroom, which is fantastic, in the grey room, followed up by the refusal handshake with Benny Safdie at the end. absolute power play. Loved her in this film. And I think she's got, I don't want to say great chemistry with Cillian because we just keep saying he's been perfect with pretty much everyone, but I'm so happy to see Emily Blunt in a Christopher Nolan film in a leading role, and I'd love to see them do another one together because she's one of my favorite actresses, and I absolutely adore her to the moon. And even kind of segueing that into Florence Pugh, fifth billing, bears all in the film, isn't in the film for much, but a very, very important part of Oppenheimer's life. Fair play to Florence, which I would say is probably one of the, I don't know what you'd call like her role. It's like she's playing the role of a mistress. That's for a young actress to be doing that in a Nolan film. Credit to her for taking that on. I don't know how do you say it politely that she's great from the scenes we get, but to put herself out there, I guess, is even more not insane. That sounds horrible. I guess comfortable with herself. What's the right term?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, Emily Blunt, I do think, gives one of her best performances, and I know a lot of people have a problem with Nolan's treatment of women in films, which I get. I actually do think some of his best characters are the women. I think, I outside of Batman, where I do think the women are a bit weak, but I think that Rebecca Hall and Scarlett Johansson in The Prestige are some of the best characters. I think Murphy in Interstellar is the standout character in that. I think I got a lot of time. She's not in it enough. He's not in it enough. Sorry, he's not in it enough. But Elliot Page in Inception, I think, stills that. Well, it's a bit confusing because at the time Ellen Page, but now Elliot Page. That character Ariadne is a great character. I do think Kitty is incredibly well done. I love the thing of he can't tell her if he's achieved the atom bomb, so he has the thing of the code of take if it works, I'll tell you to take the washing in, and if it doesn't work, I'll tell you to not take the washing in. And then that nice callback when he's clearly lost in the the white room, and he says to her, "You can tell my wife not." He calls her and says, "Don't take the washing in," and it's kind of a devastating line because that she immediately knows he's effed. And yeah, like you say, the refusal of the handshake, that final scene. The conversation with Einstein that, and he says, he basically lays out Oppenheimer's future and he says, they'll throw parties, they'll celebrate your name, but just remember, it won't be for you. It will be for them. And he says, they'll forgive you and they'll say all is forgotten and they'll offer you their hand. And yeah, it won't be for you, it'll be for them. It's such an amazing scene. And I love the fact that the dynamic between Oppenheimer and Kitty is perfectly encapsulated when someone who has betrayed Oppenheimer offers his hand and Oppenheimer takes it and Kitty looks at him like he's dirt on her shoe. Even to the end, she's like, nah, you don't screw my husband over and expect me to say all is forgiven. But Oppenheimer still wants to be in with them.
Yeah.
He's still looking for approval. And Kitty's like, nah, fuck you. Like, you can get stuff, mate. And the way that he kind of, because Benny Safdie in this is huge. I don't remember.
Yeah,
he's enormous.
Quality in this.
He's like a bear of a man. He's, especially because I saw him in Are You There, God? And he's like kind of this skinny, nebbish guy. And then all of a sudden he's like this massive bear. And even he looks scared of Kitty. It's like nobody wants to mess with
puts the glasses on really quickly, like, You got a great comment by each. So I didn't go an Albert in the award. It's not for me, it's for them. I mean, how did we get the ending? The award meaning for them was more of the way I read that was when they gave Einstein this award, it's sort of like, you did this and we've built our careers off of your work, but you've not really done anything since. And that's how I viewed that final piece is, he did this for America oh look, the guy in here that's gone on and built the hydrogen bomb after that wanted it all this time. It's very much the award is to remember what they did in the past, but they're sort of putting it over him by them awarding it to him, saying, look how great we are because we're choosing to award you for what you've done already. That's my logic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, my interpretation of the way Einstein meant it to Oppenheimer is that they'll be giving you awards, but what they're doing is they're trying to soothe their own guilty conscience. So the fact that, you know, all these people that stabbed him in the back are suddenly like, hey, here's this award, is kind of them going, we fucked up, we're sorry. It's them trying to placate their own guilty conscience. So it's not an award for him. It's them trying to kind of hide their guilt, is what I think Einstein...
And the country as well. And the country issuing it as well is the big thing.
Yeah. I think that's what Einstein meant, is that they'll give you something, but what they're actually doing is trying to make themselves feel better. Which is what they do, which is what always happens. And, you know...
I'm with you.
I do think Einstein, Tom Conti as Einstein, I do think is great. I mean, I like Tom Conti as an actor. I've been a fan of his for a long time. I like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which he's in, which is a fantastic war film. If you ever get a chance to see it.
Paddington 2, I saw for the first time of the week, which he's in.
Friends, where he played Emily's father, who hated Jennifer Saunders, his wife. Says he could kill Ross's dad. I could kill you with my thumb. He's great. He's great, and he is great as Einstein. And all of Einstein's scenes are so laced with this sense that he's like, same thing that happened to me will happen to you. Good luck, but it's a vicious cycle. They'll hate you.
I don't want to talk about social media too much, but the Einstein stuff was really funny to me in a sick way that, you know, the overreaction to No Way Home. And I was part of this, where you remember that clip when it was like Andrew Garfield comes out and someone in America did a backflip on a video and it went viral. A few weeks ago, people were doing reels, and it's like when Einstein turned up in Oppenheimer and they were using the old No Way Home crowd footage, and they'd put the trailer into the No Way Home footage, so they were like dancing around Einstein turning up. Today's screening, when there's a scene where a car goes past and Einstein's just there, people started laughing. And I actually think I'm the same as you. He had a presence in the film, and you know, one of the few things I did know was that I knew that Einstein did know Oppenheimer before this film. And I know that he'd learned from him in the 30s. I didn't know about the relationship, you know, into the 50s onwards. But some people are really surprised that they cross paths, which is really interesting. Again, you know, we don't have science backgrounds, and I loved him in this film. It's a performance, right? You could have chucked Einstein in there for the sake of it to say, look, Einstein knew Oppenheimer, and that could have been it. But I like the fact that the whole film hinges on that moment between them and the daunting conversation at the end that they have. Daunting, it's haunting, whatever you want it to be. Speaking of haunting, I got the first Haunting in Venice trailer. I hadn't seen it online. And this is at the BFI IMAX, the biggest cinema in the country, and then the moustache turned up.
Rose back, and I could not be happier. I liked Haunting.
And he's in this, and then he was in this with an accent still.
I've got to say, I love Sir Kenneth Branagh. I think he's one of our great thespians. He's a fantastic director. He cannot do accents, and yet he seems to be at a point in his career where he's like, won't take any role unless I get to do accent. Tenet, the Poirots, this. He's like, hello, I'm Niels Bohr. Also, right, here's the thing about Branagh's thing. Niels Bohr is Dutch, right? I had to look this up because I'm telling you now, and I will fight anyone.
They're talking German. They're talking German when they're meant to be talking Dutch as well. That's what I've heard too.
He's doing a South African accent. I don't care what anyone says. I swear to God, I was like, is Niels Bohr South African? I looked up, he's like, he's Dutch. What is... Branagh is literally like, oh, don't worry, guys, I've got this all sorted out. Did you see the size of them prawns? Don't worry. He was honestly... His accent was poor, but I love Kenneth Branagh so much that I forgive him. I forgive his Poirot. I like Death on the Nile. I was the only person in the Odeon Leicester Square. Everyone walked out of it. Everyone on socials was going, it was dreadful. And there's me going, I enjoyed it. So you know what?
I did a double bill with Belfast and that.
I don't want to see any of those critics at A Haunting in Venice. I want to be there on my own, the only critic who likes Poirot. I love Kenneth Branagh.
I
He's
like him
great.
too. You're not the only one.
He
We've
is
got a
great.
quick.
And
I mean, listen, the
bad
ensemble
accent
cast
is
for
great.
this. As much as I want to go through everyone, we can't. But quickly, Dave Alden Ehrenreich was incredible. Loved him in this.
Yeah,
One of the only
agreed.
unnamed characters, but understand his role for the audience of the story. Do I bring the Wikipedia? I want to talk, not in depth. There's some names that pop up who I just thought were amazing. Josh Hartnett, I've not actually seen anything before. Loved him as Lawrence in this. The actor that plays Chevalier. There are so many actors. It's ridiculous in this film. Is this one of the best casts I've ever seen in a film? Maybe. It just felt. I mean, when Josh from Drake and Josh pops up, yeah, that's a better term. Is it the biggest cast? Is probably better than best. But
it's Avengers Endgame for people that like thespians.
Jack Quaid just sitting around a room, occasionally playing the bongo. It's like that's the guy that's led the boys for 4 seasons, and he's just there in this film to exist. But I think Benny Safdie, to me, is one of the people that almost steals this entire film. And I love that. I guess he has a character. He's great from his sweaty introduction to the putting all the UV stuff on for when they're building, for when they're doing the test. I just thought he's a great time, and the Rob Pattinson fan in me is sitting there saying, "Well, Christopher Nolan was influenced to do Oppenheimer next from a present from Rob Pattinson." He hires one of the directors that gave Rob Pattinson his not big break. That's a massive insult to Rob Pattinson's career, but one of the big films in, I think,
dare insult Twilight.
No, I'm not, because I don't mind those films as much. What's the right term for
it? Do you know what? It gave him the role that I think people who
start looking at differently
about,
right?
Yeah, because it's kind of it's also the thing. It was very handy when, and this happens whenever there's a Batman casting. This always happens. It happened with Keaton. It happened with Bale. It happened with Heath Ledger. It happened with Anne Hathaway, Ben Affleck, and it happened with Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson's going to be Batman, or the guy from Twilight, and you just want to grab a DVD of Good Time and ram it down their throat and go, watch something else. Yeah. Watch Maps to the Stars. Watch Cosmopolis. Watch High Life. Watch something that isn't a blockbuster. And I'm telling you, because him and Kristen Stewart as well, to her credit, have done weird. They're like, look, we made a fortune off them Twilight movies. And he basically went, anytime a director who's done weird shit calls me up and says, I've got some weird shit for you, I'm going to say yes. And, he spent 10 odd years just doing David Cronenberg nightmare movies. And and Good Time, when they announced that he was playing Batman, I was like, if you put the Batman suit on him in Good Time, that's a good movie. And that's basically what they did. Those scenes of him where he's just got like guy liner on and the hoodie on the motorbike, I'm like, oh man, the Safdies should do Batman. I would love to watch the Safdies do Batman.
But that's kind of it with it. And I just, I mean, I know that Nolan sort of hinted he tried to get him a role, but he just said politely, he's busy, he's in demand. It doesn't matter that he wasn't in this because the cast is insane. And the last person I really want to briefly talk about is Jason Clarke. I think he's a massively underrated actor. He's not done many, I guess you could say, blockbusters. Unfortunately, the one you'll know is Terminator Genesis.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which he was great.
Yes, I know Dawn. I was going to follow up saying Dawn's the good
White
one.
House
but
down.
I
White
thought
House
he was.
Down.
I loved him in this despicable character. Has an incredible presence. Happy to be upstaged by Emily Blunt. Happy to play along with Cillian and the rest. And Jason Clarke's a really nice surprise, I think, in this film.
Where he's
and how much screen time he gets.
Oppenheimer both barrels. He's like, and the light becomes intense, and he's like proper screaming, and you're just like, oh man, Jason Clarke's such a great actor. Olivia Thirlby, who people probably know from
in this as well. Dread
and Juno, and I was there like, oh man, I forgot how great she is. Why isn't she in more stuff? Like, this movie is a great showcase of like, can we get some better roles for Josh Hartnett, because he's actually great. And I know that he was almost Batman for Nolan, so it felt like a tip of the hat there. And it was like, oh man, we really need to be getting these actors better stuff to do instead of waiting for Nolan to resurrect careers.
And I forgot his name. The actor from what were they joking about? No, that could be wrong. Ignore me. Yeah, just sorry. In regards to on because we've got an hour and a half, and listen, someone somewhere is going to do a podcast with like an episode per person, and whoever does that is a legend because even like people like Matthew Modine popping up and oh god, I've forgotten his name. David Das. I can never pronounce his surname. He appeared in The Dark Knight, his first ever role. He's been in all the James Gunn films. David
Dasmalchian.
That's the one. Love the fact, he's back in a Nolan film. I know he wasn't in Dark Knight much.
He's
exactly, and
he's so in demand now, and he's great. David Dasmalchian. Yeah. Let's get him because honestly, he kind of steals a lot of the scenes in this, and also absolutely best performance in The Boogeyman earlier this year. Had one scene, smashed it, terrifying, great. Love that guy. I think he's great.
And I think as you're right, you know, I know he pops in a couple of Denny films as well, but he's, as you said, he's more in demand now, which I think is great for him. And again, this film just delivered. We've sort of get upset saying, we forgot to talk about this person. But listen, there's so many people to talk about with this cast. We've got to have to move on. We spoke about this. We spoke about
how many more people? James Darcy.
Like Gary Oldman. You can just keep going and going and going and going. I want to talk about Ludwig Göransson, who I think is one of the... I have this sort of trinity of film composers, and I love my soundtracks. And for many, many years, my three favorite composers for a long time has been John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and Michael Giacchino. Can't put it past them. No disrespect to Michael Giacchino, but I've always seen Zimmer and John Williams. I mean, they're almost different generations within themselves. So I think Hans Zimmer's closest to age to Giacchino, but Williams and Zimmer are almost like the two generational composers. A lot of I would say the industry would say that, not me, my own persona. I think Ludwig Göransson is the composer of tomorrow. And that's a really weird statement to make, but he's only 38. He's already won Oscars. I think he's won Grammys. He's worked with Childish Gambino after meeting Donald Glover on Community, producing his music. He's been working with Ryan Coogler since they were students together. He is, I think, the best composer of the last, I don't want to say 10 years, that sounds really unfair and critical of others, but for the next 20 years, Ludwig Göransson is going to be one of the most in-demand composers. And this score, I was listening to it in the car on Friday when I was really emotional, and I've been listening to it a lot since. He's so good at bringing in the electronic side of stuff. He's so good at bringing in the violin as the key one for this. I've not watched the featurette yet. It's one of the few I've not seen. I've got the soundtrack on pre-order from Mondo. The vinyl's up for pre-order if people want it on a special orange fire LP, of course, for Oppenheimer. But I think he'll be up for best composer again. And listen, if you're the guy that, I don't want to say replaced Hans Zimmer, that's horrible. Hans Zimmer's been busy recording Dune 1 and 2, which is why he's not been 10 or Oppenheimer.
To be fair, the fact that Hans Zimmer, I think he even said in an interview, it was like, it broke my heart to say no to Nolan, but I've wanted to do the music for Dune since I read it as a kid. And you're like, if it's your dream, I don't even think Nolan would begrudge a dream project. And also from Denis Villeneuve, if you're getting turned down for anyone, it might as well be one of the new greats. You would be like, all right, this is a guy who's making cinema. Fair play. If it's your dream project, I will allow you to do it. But you know, you were saying about Giacchino. There's a lot. Giacchino's music is very John Williams-esque. You know, I feel like he's the new John Williams, which makes sense why he would do a Star Wars, why he's J.J. Abrams' go-to guy. I love Giacchino. Don't get me wrong. Ludwig's score, listening to it as the film was going on, I was like, this is a really great score. And I love his scores. You know, I know people love his Mandalorian stuff. I do think the scores for the two Black Panthers are some of, you know, I'm a big soundtrack guy as well. And I like the soundtracks to the Marvel films. You know, I like even the lesser ones, but his score, you know, the ancestral plane motif in Black Panther is one of the most beautiful pieces of music in a blockbuster. It's so, and also it's great because that bit in Infinity War when they go to Wakanda and it plays the Wakandan theme and everybody cheers.
Everyone was hyped.
2 months before, and you're like, that is good scoring. And his score for this, I mean, you know, Oscars, talk of Oscars, I could see Oppenheimer being nominated for pretty much everything. because I can't think of a category apart from original screenplay. I can't think of a category in which it couldn't be nominated. Like, the sound is great.
Well, it's going to be for adapted screenplay.
Yeah, I could see it being. I could see them even. The positioning of actors is always weird. Like, was I can't remember her name. Michelle Williams, was she the lead actress of Fabelmans? I think she was the supporting, but I could see them going, let's get Emily for lead so we can get Florence for supporting, get two supporting that. Like, I could see this up for everything because the cinematography is top notch. I could see Hoyte van Hoytema being nominated. I think Ludwig Göransson should be nominated. I do think the sound, the costumes are great. The production design, the way that they, you could just tell what time period it is, even just by
the town.
Naturally, the way they built the special effects, the fact that they're not done in computers, they're done practically because Nolan, I think, computer killed a lot.
Rebuild the atomic bomb.
I love those memes. I'll tell you one thing about that scene. I know we talked about a lot of scenes, but one scene that I think is the most upsetting scene in the film when the stamping feet for applause, and he walks in, and as he's trying to give a speech, he's seeing visions of people crying, screaming, bleeding, and then he tries to make a joke. He goes, "Well, I don't think the Japanese liked it very much," and it's the most hollow joke because he says it, people are laughing, and as they're laughing, I know it's Nolan's daughter Flora, you see her face start to peel away as the bomb goes off. And I know Nolan said that's his way of contextualizing what this bomb can do. And actually, I don't think you need to see I don't need to see millions of innocent people die, because that scene of her face starting to melt and people holding each other and crying is one of the most upsetting things I've seen in a long time, and makes me think, because there's a lot of upsetting stuff in Nolan films, and I know this is a 15 and he's been making 12As for 15 years. Nolan, make a horror film. Just make a horror film, because it would be
they say it's Tarantino, don't they?
Huh?
He'd be torturing you. It's like Tarantino, isn't it, when they say Tarantino should do one? Nolan would be torturing you from the moment the film starts. Like, I would not want to, if he put his mind to it, he would horrify people.
It would be a Midsommar. It wouldn't be like a slash. It'd be like a Midsommar type, A24.
People would be
style.
Traumatized.
Oh yeah,
they'd be traumatized the rest of their life, and he'll be shot on IMAX 70mm.
But that scene was so, for the sound design, for the production design, the costumes. I can't imagine it not being up for every award imaginable. And I think it could potentially.
I'm with you.
Sweep. Again,
it's so early, but this is
June 2 might be
the
best thing in the world. Killers of the Flower Moon might be the best thing I've ever seen. Napoleon might knock my socks off, but.
And this is kind of where I was. That when I came out on Friday, I was so emotionally devastated. I sort of said to a couple of my friends that, saying, "Oh, well, it's nothing to do with the film. It's not like Rise of Skywalker, where I came out sort of emotionally wrecked because I didn't like it." I came out of this film like, I've just seen. I don't like giving ratings. I do it on Letterboxd for the sake of it, but they mean nothing. Really, they mean nothing. I was like, yeah, easy 10 out of 10. One of the best films I've seen in a long time. Arguably Nolan's best directed film. But I was like, but I couldn't give two shits about that right now. I feel messed up. Like, I have been through the wars and I've just sat through this 3-hour film. And I do sit here, I know we're sort of jumping ahead, but from the technical standpoint, I've got nothing to fault with this film. And that's everything from every single person being cast correctly, for the, as you said, set design, production design, the editing, the screenplay. I mean, the whole screenplay written in point of view. Actors saying they've never seen that before. How do you write a screenplay in point of view? I mean, I understand why, but I want to read the screenplay, and I never say that about films. I really want to read this to see how that was for the actor as well. But kind of, it's talking the soundtrack of this, which is amazing, by is there a scene we want to talk about we've not spoke about? Because we're in the part of the schedule where it basically says scenes that stand out and Oscars.
All
and
of
listen,
them,
the
and
Oscars.
all of them.
And this is it. I'm taking off my, I mean, you can see behind me. Talk about Nolan fanboy. Yeah, they've got the photo of me and him, the photo of me and Hans Zimmer, the Dark Knight stuff everywhere, Oppenheimer quads. Let's take all the bias out that no one can believe I'm going to do. I would be incredibly surprised if this doesn't sweep. And one of the big reasons I'm going to make this now, say this on July the 23rd for history's sake, we don't know what's going to happen with this industry right now. With the strikes, we don't know how long they're going to go on for. We can't estimate. People are very naive to estimate if they are. We don't know what film's going to play at award seasons. We don't know who's going to do promo. Again, I've not seen Barbie. I'm not saying Barbie's going to be it for every Oscar, but we are potentially in a period of unknown. Not for the first time in a long time, because we had it literally 2-3 years ago of COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with this industry for the rest of the year. It is just as simple as that. Murmurs of Dune being delayed, which I don't quite believe. They've already spent so much on marketing. I really don't think they would delay it. But who are we to know what the studios are planning right now, what the actors want to do, what they want to promote, what they can and can't be doing. So we're in this really weird environment. And kind of looking on this film now, we're heading into my final thoughts. Stephen, I know I'm not seen Barbie yet. Having the fourth biggest, I know this is domestic being America, not here in the UK, the fourth biggest weekend of the industry of the 21st century, probably the fourth biggest overall, unadjusted for inflation. The top three are all films that have come out and made like this weekend made 400 million, but this one film made 380 of that 400 million. Barbie's made 155 million this weekend in America for a weekend that's made $302 million. Oppenheimer's done, I think, 79 million. The two like insane records being broken, like the two new films to debut of the most amount, or etc. People phrase them in different ways. This has been an unbelievable weekend for the industry, for audiences that are going for. A lot of people are using the words original films around. I disagree. This is an adapted biopic. Barbie is not
original.
My thoughts too.
One's
Non-superheroes, the term I'd use.
Yeah, but
exactly.
It's the thing as well is I think what it shows, and again, this isn't. I hate people who slag off Marvel for the sake of Marvel. I love Marvel. Do not get me wrong. You know how much I love Marvel movies. I watched Black Widow yesterday. That's how much I love Marvel. But what it says is there is a market for both. That it doesn't need to be, and it's what James Gray was saying, that there's nothing wrong with comic book movies. Okay, some comic book movies are bloody brilliant. Okay, I love Logan. It makes me cry every time I watch it. I love No Way Home. Also made me cry. I loved, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a fantastic movie that people went to go see. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, also great. But what this is saying is there is a market for other films that are maybe not superheroes punching each other in the face. There is a market for these. And I think June also kind of showed it as well. There's a market for an event, not necessarily Marvel Chapter 100 or DC's new reboot or whatever, all of which I'm excited for and all of which I will be going to see, no doubt about that. But the fact that Barbenheimer has become a trending topic, everyone's talking about. People I know who don't even like movies, don't like movies, but aren't tuned in. My dad has spoken about Barbenheimer. My dad only watches art movies and he knows about Barbenheimer. That you've got people from all races, all backgrounds, family, well, not families because one's a 15, but people are doing a double bill, which nobody does anymore outside of people at the Prince Charles, are double billing. Cinemas are programming double bills. They're selling double bill tickets for Barbie and Oppenheimer. People are wearing T-shirts that say Barbenheimer. The memes, you can't manufacture that kind of thing. People talk about cultural standpoint. A film about a guy who died 50 odd years ago and created the atomic bomb, and a toy that for a long time was seen as the antithesis of feminism, are both smashing the box office at the first week of the summer holidays with audiences, some of whom will never pick up a history book. some of whom would never admit to seeing a Barbie movie. You know, you've got our current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, taking his kids to see Barbenheimer and posting it on
Yes,
social media.
I tweeted it to the Met Police that he's took under 15s to a 15 film.
They're under 15, Rishi, you criminal. But you've got the Prime Minister of one of the most biggest countries in the world, a superpower, if you will, which I think the UK kind of is, talking Barbenheimer. Cinema will live as long as things are events. It doesn't have. I don't think it even has to be a franchise, because Nope did really well. Nope went on the basis that people went, that Jordan Peele is a good filmmaker. And I think Oppenheimer didn't necessarily need to be Oppenheimer. It could have been another Tenet. But Nolan has built a reputation. The fact that, Mark Kermode said that Warner Brothers basically allowed him to do Inception as a thank you for making all the money with The Dark Knight, and then let him do The Dark Knight Rises as a thank you for Inception, and then let him do Interstellar as a thank you for The Dark Knight Rises, and then Dunkirk as a thank you. Like all his movies are, cheers for making us all that cash, by the way, with your massive film. And half of them are original ideas that involve alternate universes and tesseracts and things. And I think if you can create an event,
they'd never approve.
If you could create
no one else gets to make those films.
People will go. People will flock to see a film if it's part of the conversation. And no offense to Quantumania, it wasn't part of the conversation. People saw it, and a bit like popcorn. Once they'd finished it, they forgot it. No offense to it, it was enjoyable enough, but it wasn't. It's not had the staying power that, again, this weekend, I think Mattel or whatever company makes them has run out of I'm Kenough hoodies. They've sold out. The film's been out 2 days and they've sold out of these hoodies. And I think that is kind of, I hope it shows studios, one, that they need to respect filmmakers more. Solidarity with the writers and the reason you like films is those writers. The reason you like those films is actors and directors, but they're not on strike, so they don't count. But I think they need to accept writers, directors, actors, all the technical people as well that make films. Give them the freedom to do what they want to do, and people will watch it. And it doesn't need to be franchise entry 500, reboot number 7. I think Nope and Tenet. I mean, Tenet is considered a disappointment, but only because it opened when half the world was still locked down. But that still did quite. And people still win. What if
a blockbuster would have opened in August 2020? None of them. Only a Nolan film could open because he asked for it, and
even
no other film was making the money it did. Exactly, and and I'll say this: I know we weren't vaccinated at that point in time, but to be there in August, to people that needed to get out, that wanted to get out, that missed that cinema, people still went that could. And we're in a really challenging time at the moment for this industry, where, and the way I like to say it is, you mentioned that studios need to respect filmmakers. They 100% do need to respect the filmmakers. A lot of the time, in the case of Barbenheimer, it's a writer and director, right? They're doing the same thing. Of course, Noah Baumbach also included on the Rabi writing credits.
Because of the biting satire. I did enjoy
this is one of these weekends where you really hope that they make the right observations from it.
Yeah,
rather than say, what would be great? Let's now do a biopic on the did they name drop Nobel, who created dynamite? Right. Let's get the Nobel biopic out now. Oh, Barbie was a success. Well, let's authorize Bratz, the movie, which has probably already happened. And it's one of these.
Not to plug another podcast, but if you're interested in what people think of the Bratz movie, W Rated with Claire and Daisy go into great detail about that film, and it's awful. But
there you go.
The worrying thing is that they don't just go, quick, we need more toy IPs. Quick. Like the way they did after Lego.
Quick, let's have Transformers meet the G.I. Joes. And this is it. And
stop trying to make G.I. Joe a thing. No, but Action Man the movie, or I don't know, Polly Pocket the movie.
And this is what
You
I'm
don't
worried
need
about.
that.
And this is where like the industry will thrive when filmmakers can thrive, when they have creative control, when they have the budgets. All respect to Greta Gerwig. I saw Lady Bird for the first time the other day, and some insane takes online that some people criticized her for doing a studio film because she came out and says, "I want to make big blockbuster studio films. I want to have films like Christopher Nolan." Give it to her. She just had the highest opening weekend ever for a female director.
No one was
which
giving
is
Nolan
not
these budgets before he made Batman Begin.
I wouldn't even say Batman Begins. I'd say The Dark Knight. It took The
Batman
Dark
Begins
Knight
was
for able
not
to him
big
to
then.
get it.
Yeah, he had to do a franchise movie before he could do whatever he wanted. And if Greta Gerwig's got to do Narnia so that she can make whatever she wants to make, then power to her. And also, it's a Barbie film. All right, fine. It's about a doll. I used to play with some Barbies because I had a sister. She had Barbies. I had Action Man. Who's Action Man going to hang out with? A Xenomorph? I don't think so. Like, there's some crossovers we're not ready for. But like, it's a Barbie movie that she's basically made her movie within the confines of Barbie. And in a way, Nolan's done the same thing within the confines of a biopic about J. Robert Oppenheimer. Has gone, really? I'm just interested in guys who are obsessed. And also guys who have slightly less successful brothers. Because that did make me laugh. He was like, what about my brother and his wife, whose name I can't remember? I wonder how Lisa Joy felt about that. She's just there like, I created Westworld, man.
Well, and there was a third Oppenheimer brother who wasn't mentioned. And there is a third Nolan brother whose code name was Oppenheimer.
Oh my God.
I won't tell you what industry he worked in, but if you know.
If you don't know about the third Nolan, I am begging you now, look up the third Nolan. It is also, it's quite interesting.
It explains a lot, I think. When
you look back at what job does Leonardo DiCaprio have in Inception? What's his job? Okay. It is interesting. The third Nolan, he's also great at what he does. Okay. Nolan's a great director. Jonathan Nolan's a great TV guy, and this Nolan, he's good at what he does. Look it up. That's his next film. Is a biopic about his own brother.
But and this is it. But kind of segueing away from that. Please read up, people. It is incredible. Let's get into final thoughts on Oppenheimer. No, not the code name for the other Nolan brother. Oppenheimer, the film. Listen, we've waxed lyrical. We've gone almost 2 hours, which is remarkable. So, firstly, thank you for being on so long. I am going to round this up in 4 words, and I'm probably going to be saying this. I'm going to be carrying this through to award season. Film of the year. I'm not going to jump in. I'm not going to say decade. I'm not going to say century. I'm saying right now. I haven't actually seen Barbie, ironically. This could change in the next week. But it's going to take something special for me to react. When we did a Nolan series 3 years ago, I ended with a ranking video. And I should probably re-listen to it to remember what I put. But in the last 3 years, my emotional state's been very different to what it was back then. I'm far more open in my emotions and things like that. And I think I said to you, I don't know if you were live, but I can't rewatch Interstellar because I literally just weep. And I just struggle sometimes. And I don't, every time on Instagram and a reel pops up about Christopher Nolan and Stay starts playing, I'm just sat there saying, nope, like I'm not going to cry on a Monday night. And the state this film's left me in purely on the basis that I've never felt this way about a film. I've never reacted in this way about a film, that I want to see it again. And I've already seen it 3 times. I'm going to wait. I do want to see it again at the BFI IMAX. I am at the BFI IMAX in August for Tron, for its anniversary, not anniversary, for the Disney anniversary. If they're showing Oppenheimer after, do I just stay? Probably will. So I'm curious to see it again. I want to see it at the BFI once more. And I'm encouraging everyone, please watch the 70-minute film. But in regards to a new release from my favorite director, the director that, without his work, I wouldn't have gone on to study film. I wouldn't have gone on to work in the film industry. Wouldn't have gone on to set this channel up as a hobby on the side to study and all the other things that have come from it since. It's truly a special time to be a fan of cinema. As terrible as it is for all the strikes also happen concurrently, and I hope that films like this are going to be able to encourage studios to open up their eyes to talk to people to get these issues ironed out, because we need a functioning industry. I'm not saying humanity deserves it, but yeah, they even mentioned I've seen this film. I'm going to get upset if I talk about it. So yeah, to me, final thoughts. Just leaving it there. Yeah, that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it 5 stars immediately. I would be shocked if it doesn't rank in my top 10 of the year. I've often complained I'm not that interested in World War II. I think it's a bit like the Christopher Nolan of history, where you're like, yeah, a bit basic to be interested in World War.
Don't get me started. Every time someone pops up saying, "Why don't you like the royal family?" And I'm just sat there, cage to arms. Here we go. This is the years of hell to come down to this royal family. Trees and lights on YouTube.
There we go. You know, I can't imagine it not being in my top 10. Yeah, I can't imagine it not, because just for me everything worked about it. And I do to an extent understand some of the criticisms about, you know, sidelining of women. I understand that, and I you know, and I'm somebody who is quite sensitive towards those sort of things, and not, you know, exploring the ramifications of Native Americans, of the Japanese, of things like that. But at the same time, that's not the film Christopher Nolan was ever going to make. He was never going to make a film about Hiroshima or Nagasaki or the Native Americans, or about the wife and lover of Oppenheimer. And it's funny, the assumption, I remember there was loads of stuff on, and Twitter's not the real world, but there was loads of stuff on Twitter about how it's going to glorify this awful man who did this awful thing. And my argument was, what in Christopher Nolan's 20-year career has ever given anyone the impression he's pro-nuclear energy? The villain plan of Batman Begins: use a microwave emitter that targets water to kill an entire subset of society, right? And in this film, they talk about hydrogen bombs. What, you know, Dark Knight, pitting 2 different people against each other for self-assured destruction. What do they opt for? Neither dies. Dark Knight Rises, all about clean energy that got turned into a nuclear bomb. It depressed Batman so much he retired for 8 years. The whole film ends with him deciding to potentially kill himself to save everyone from a nuclear bomb. Oppenheimer is name dropped in Tenet. The villains of Tenet want to go back in time because climate change has decimated their world. Same thing in Interstellar. Dunkirk is about how war is terrifying. Nothing in his career should lead anyone to think that he's pro-nuclear war or pro-war. He's not. He's quite clearly terrified about the environment collapsing. The fact that 2 of his biggest films are about the environment collapsing and people trying to escape it. And his villains are always those sort of people: Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul and Bane, even to an extent Professor Brand and Dr. Mann in Interstellar. You know, they want survival at the expense of anyone else, you know, and eventually Professor Brand feels great regret at the end of his life, not unlike Oppenheimer. So it's all stuff that Nolan is incredibly concerned with. But for me, I don't know, the magic sauce in this was just that everything came together in a way that, you know, not everything came together in Tenet for me. I admire that film more than like it. And it's weird to say I like this film or that I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's weird to say that because, you know, you go, oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. And you're like, you enjoyed a film about the man who killed millions of people. You're like, all right, well, when you put it like that, but it's so interesting and it's so gripping and thrilling that, you know, hopefully, you know, executives get their head out their backsides and give the people what they deserve, because I do want to see other films. I would be very surprised if there is a film this year that surprises me quite as much. But then I haven't seen Dune Part 2, which might really knock me away. I mean, no, you know, I also want to see the End these strikes. I want to see Napoleon. I want to see it.
This is it. We're heading into kind of this weekend gone. Yes, there's a few blockbusters in August, right? The Mighty Blue Beetle that everyone's anticipating, Gran Turismo, Haunted Mansion. For some reason, not coming out in October. There's not really a big film out until June. That's the way I've seen it. I'm not saying
How dare
because
you?
of
Are you saying
a
Haunting in Venice will not be big? How dare you?
You know what I mean? They're like the big anticipation ones, and it's going to be an interesting few months. Strikes aside, we've had so many juggernaut films almost weekly over the last 2 months that it's nice to have a bit of a break from it. And it's going to be, again, talking box office really briefly. No one has been able to predict how this year has gone. They're lying if they said, "Oh, Barbie was going to open to 300 mil worldwide." No one thought that last week. No one thought that the week before.
I didn't think that Barbie would do well. I just didn't. But that's the
no, of course. And I thought the same originally. And
power of an event.
I thought this, and this is it. And the event has carried both of these to unknown proportions. And next week will be the same thing. We don't know what their second weekends are going to be, which is always the key. The second weekend is always key. So it's one of them where we're in an interesting place where if you're into numbers, into box office, it's been an unpredictable summer, and we're kind of going out on a bang in towards the end of July, and hopefully it's a bang that gets bigger. And just kind of segueing on the Nolan thing, I would say that this film, to me, what you're saying there is the same how I felt that it's hard to say you can enjoy it. Like if I was ranking my Nolan films, I think this is definitively best in the concept of craftsmanship. I would say this is his best film. But could I say I enjoy this film more than The Dark Knight or Inception? Me personally, probably no. And it's one of those things where that's why ranking videos are so tricky to do, because you've got to look at your favorite versus the quality and whatnot. And fitting words for this, and it's what I've thought since the day this film was announced. Oh, Nolan's doing a film about the man to create the atomic bomb. I was like, sounds about right. It's almost the accumulation of his career. And I had a terrible, terrible comparison to make. And if you let me make it, I don't mean to sound bad. It reminds me of, it sounds horrible saying because there's two different atrocities at the ends of it. Spielberg's career built to Schindler's List. That's why I always say that. I could argue just about the same year because of how insanely talented his career has been. But in terms of his personal life, what he'd been through, not necessarily his interests, but his life's point, Schindler's List is this not peak point as a filmmaker. It hits this level where a lot of things are building his competency not to want to take on a project like that until he could do it. It's a rubbish comparison to Oppenheimer just because of the subject matters. But I feel that with Nolan's career, it is led towards a film such as this. What you've been saying today of the obsession being a keyword as well. I feel that it's this maturity point of him as a director that, he's done historical films. You mentioned the films he's done with Obsession. He's done, adapted films before with Batman. Yes, that's fictional, but so many proportions of his career, I think, led to this film today. That's why we're here talking about. That's why even the development of IMAX and all these other things, it feels like Oppenheimer is. I despise the same magnum opus, so I hope someone comes up with a better term. But it feels like this is where it's been leading towards. And we've mentioned Oscars a lot. We got robbed of Dunkirk. As far as I'm concerned, because it came out in July, not because it came out in December. And I really hope this year, could this be the one that carries it through? Could he get a triple crown? Could he get adapted screenplay, film, and director? Would be insane. But listen, it's too early. It's July. The Oscars are in March. We've got a long road ahead of us. So, we'll be wrapping this. This quad post is staying up. There's curious about my background. Top Gun is still on the wall. I just have another frame now, so I've been able to get a third one up. But
my only hope is that executives see the massive success of Oppenheimer, see the massive success of Barbie, and immediately go, quick, we need to capitalize on this. And then some intern goes, we haven't got any fucking writers. And then they go, let's solve this
AI can't write this. If you said to AI, write an Oppenheimer film based off that book, it would be a linear story of that book as a script.
Can you imagine an AI writing Barbie? It's not going to be half as funny as the nobody.
Exactly.
No computer is going to come up with that dance routine that's in Barbie, or some of the stuff that Helen Mirren says, which is Helen Mirren's narration. Oh, chef's kiss, great. Helen Mirren, Give us some kind of narration award, because she really, really was great. No AI is going to come up with that. No AI. I've
Exactly.
seen those things where it's like, I told an AI to write a Batman film, and it's like, this is the dumbest thing.
We've got friends of the channel, Blue Banther Milk, that had AI write Star Wars 10 years ago, before this was what it is now. And it was hilarious, and it went viral, and it was terrible. Now we're in a point where we can't really do this sort of stuff anymore, because the studios want to actually use AI, which is terrifying. And it is one of those, AI, not to get into the conversation, but should be a tool in the future to help humanity with. But the corporations are jumping the gun with something that is not even remotely near ready, but to then industrialize it. And that's not just film studios. That is all sectors, all walks of life that are doing stuff like this. And it is scary times. So
the entity is
the
coming.
Studios, this is it, Skynet. And the studios, we want writers to be able to write. We want actors to be able to act. And they've got to be compensated for it, because let's say one thing about this weekend, Oppenheimer is going to be a box office profit, as is Barbie. They're going to be juggernaut hits for their budgets, and there's going to be a lot of profit to be made off this. And let's hope for the best we can is that the chain reaction of these strikes aren't accelerating, that we do get things better. But again, it's another weird way to end it. It's been an amazing review. As Paul, it's always great to get on these discussions, and this one is a bit different. But we want to hear from people at home. So if you're watching it later on, if you're watching down the line, yes, we didn't do the runtime of this because there'd be another 55 minutes. But we want to hear from you. So please do comment below your thoughts on Oppenheimer. If you're watching in the future, we're curious. Maybe there'll be more stuff out. Who knows? I can't wait for the behind the scenes feature on the Mushroom Cloud. And as always, follow us on social media, linktree.com/cinemasavvy. That's got links to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Also got a Redbubble link in the description for any merch. But Paul, had you back on. You've got your socials there, Paul Klein, 2 O's. Some of your social medias are, I believe, a 1 O, which is Letterboxd type of thing. I'm starting to remember.
Letterboxd and the not Twitter, I can't even Threads. If you're on Threads, then it's Paul Klein with 1 O. Same with Letterboxd. Same with TikTok. Reviews, things I'm writing. Generally saying inane rubbish. Which is basically what I do here. But if you want to see,
always happy to have you on.
If you want to see more of that insanity, then follow me. If you don't follow me then. But do.
Listen, people, please follow him. He's been in a lot of our videos. It's always great fun. We messaged you straight away. I know you've seen this early. I wanted to talk to you about the film. It's been lovely to do this review with you. And to anyone at home, thank you. He's been commenting. He's been watching along with us. It's been a long review. It's been a very deep weekend. And it's been a very exciting weekend. And what is the next video? It'll be on our social medias when there's a video to be announced. Take care, and we'll see you then.